The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot, Chapter 13, The HeLa Factory. Not long after Henrietta's death, planning began for a HeLa factory, a massive operation that would grow to produce trillions of HeLa cells each week. It was built for one reason, to help stop polio. By the end of 1951, the world was in the midst of the biggest polio epidemic in history. Schools closed, parents panicked, and the public grew desperate for a vaccine. In February 1952, Jonas Salk at the University of Pittsburgh announced that he'd developed the world's first polio vaccine, but he couldn't begin offering it to children until he tested it on a large scale to prove it was safe and effective. And doing that would require culturing cells on an enormous industrial scale, which no one had done before. The National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis, NFIP, a charity created by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who'd himself been paralyzed by polio, began organizing the largest field trial ever conducted to test the polio vaccine. Salk would inoculate 2 million children, and the NFIP would test their blood to see if they'd become immune. But doing this would require millions of neutralization tests, which involved mixing blood serum from newly vaccinated children with live polio virus and cells and culture. If the vaccine worked, the serum from a vaccinated child's blood would block the polio virus and protect the cells. If it didn't work, the virus would infect the cells, causing damage scientists could see using a microscope. The trouble was, at that point, the cells used in neutralization tests came from monkeys, which were killed in the process. This was a problem, not because of concern for animal welfare, which wasn't the issue then that it is today, but because monkeys were expensive. Doing millions of neutralization tests using monkey cells would cost millions of dollars. So the NFIP went into overdrive looking for a cultured cell that could grow on a massive scale and would be cheaper than using monkeys. The NFIP turned to Guy and a few other cell culture experts for help, and Guy recognized the opportunity as a gold mine for the field. The NFIP's March of Dimes was bringing in an average of $50 million in donations each year, and its director wanted to give much of that money to cell culturalists so they could find a way to mass-produce cells, which they'd been wanting to do for years anyway. The timing was perfect. By chance, soon after the NFIP contacted Guy for help, he realized that Henrietta's cells grew unlike any human cells he'd seen. Most cells in culture grew in a single layer in a clot on a glass surface, which meant they ran out of space quickly. Increasing their numbers was labor-intensive. Scientists had to repeatedly scrape the cells from one tube and split them into new ones to give them more space. HeLa cells, it turned out, weren't picky. They didn't need a glass surface in order to grow. They could grow floating in a culture medium that was constantly stirred by a magnetic device, an important technique Guy developed, now called growing in suspension. This meant that HeLa cells weren't limited by space in the same way other cells were. They could simply divide until they ran out of culture medium. The bigger the vat of medium, the more cells grew. This discovery meant that if HeLa was susceptible to the polio virus, which not all cells were, it would solve the mass production problem and make it possible to test the vaccine without millions of monkey cells. So in April 1952, Guy and one of his colleagues from the NFIP Advisory Committee, William Scherher, a young postdoctoral fellow at the University of Minnesota, tried infecting Henrietta's cells with poliovirus. Within days, they found that HeLa was, in fact, more susceptible to the virus than any cultured cells had ever been. When they realized this, they knew they'd found exactly what the NFIP was looking for. They also knew that before mass-producing any cells, they'd need to find a new way to ship them. Guy's air freight shipping system worked fine for sending a few cells to colleagues here and there, but it was too expensive for shipping on a massive scale. And growing cells by the billions wouldn't help anyone if they couldn't get those cells where they needed to go. So they began experimenting. On Memorial Day 1952, Guy gathered a handful of tubes containing HeLa cells and enough media for them to survive for a few days, and packed them into a tin lined with cork and filled with ice to prevent overheating. Then he typed up careful instructions for feeding and handling, and sent Mary to the post office to ship them to Scherher in Minnesota. Every post office in Baltimore was closed for the holiday, except the main branch downtown. Mary had to take several trolleys to get there, but she made it, and so did the cells. When the package arrived in Minneapolis about 4 days later, HeLa put the cells in an incubator and they began to grow. It was the first time live cells had ever been successfully shipped in the mail. In the coming months, to test different delivery methods and make sure the cells could survive long trips in any climate, Guy and HeLa sent tubes of HeLa cells around the country by plane, train, and truck from Minneapolis to Norwich to New York and back again. Only one tube died. When the NFIP heard the news that HeLa was susceptible to poliovirus and could grow in large quantities for little money, it immediately contracted William HeLa to oversee development of a HeLa distribution center at the Tuskegee Institute, one of the most prestigious black universities in the country. The NFIP chose the Tuskegee Institute for the project because of Charles Bainham, director of Negro activities for the foundation. Bainham, a science teacher and civil rights activist who was the first black foundation executive in the country, wanted the center to be located at Tuskegee because it would provide hundreds of thousands of dollars in funding, many jobs and training opportunities for young black scientists. In just a few months, a staff of 6 black scientists and technicians built a factory at Tuskegee unlike any seen before. Its walls were lined with industrial steel autoclaves for steaming sterilization, row upon row of enormous mechanically stirred vats of cultural medium, incubators, glass culturing bottles stacked on their sides, and automatic cell dispensers, tall contraptions with long, thin metal arms that squirted HeLa cells into one test tube after another. The Tuskegee team mixed thousands of liters of Guy culture medium each week using salts, minerals, and serum they collected from many students, soldiers, and cotton farmers who responded to ads in a local paper seeking blood in exchange for money. Several technicians served as a quality control assembly line, staring through microscopes at hundreds of thousands of HeLa cultures each week, making sure the samples were alive and healthy. Others shipped them on a rigid schedule to researchers at 23 polio testing centers around the country. Eventually, the Tuskegee staff grew to 35 scientists and technicians who produced 20,000 tubes of HeLa, about 6 trillion cells every week. It was the first ever cell production factory, and it started with a single vial of HeLa that Guy had sent HeLa in their first shipping experiment, not long after Henrietta's death. With those cells, scientists helped prove the Salk vaccine effective. Soon, the New York Times would run pictures of black women hunched over microscopes examining cells, black hands holding vials of HeLa, and this headline: "Unit at Tuskegee helps polio fight. Corps of Negro scientists has key role in evaluating of Dr. Salk's vaccine. HeLa cells are grown. Black scientific technicians, many of them women, used cells from a black woman to help save the lives of millions of Americans, most of them white. And they did so on the same campus and at the very same time that state officials were conducting the infamous Tuskegee syphilis studies.